us now. Only love.
Well, thank you for staying with us for this final segment. If you just joined us, you are watching Moving Forward, a provocative program produced by the Bay and Grandstand Advancement Association. We're provocative people in Bay and Grandstand. You have to resist the status quo. And that's what we're trying to do here. And we've got two eminently qualified Bahamians to assist us in understanding what went on back in the day, particularly with the involvement of the workers and the unions. The workers, after bringing this country to where it is, they seem to have taken a back seat now and allow the politicians and their cohorts to just take control.
Yeah, I think too, lost in all of this is a lack of education about what our rights are as citizens of this country. You know, in '58, one of the things that came out of the general strike was the colonial secretary came in, Lennox Lloyd, and he established the fact that you have a right to join a union. You have a right to assemble. You have a right to make demands and place demands on the government. But you know, our people today, I think we don't realize what our rights are.
That's
what we as citizens ought to have.
And even those of us who are aware of our rights, we become so timid. Whether we have become indoctrinated, whether we are intimidated, whether we are dominated, we need to begin to understand that nobody is going to give you anything. For example, we are at this particular stage in our development, as a people, we're sitting down and picking up the newspaper and reading who our heroes are or should be. I mean, that is the most ridiculous thing in the world. And then these people, these hand-picked people, these privately selected people, many of whom are of questionable qualifications, then they use that to intimidate the rest of us.
There should be an independent commission that would determine on merit who should be selected.
We of the National Heroes Committee, and I'm not going to go into that, Fred Munnings, Chairman Sebastian Campbell, and a number of others. For the last 20 years, we've been saying that governments come, governments go. They pay lip service to it when they're in opposition, but once they gain power, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, there's something about the air, the atmosphere in that little house in Rawson Square. Because they say one thing before they get there, and once they get there, there seems to be a miraculous change. So we need to find the most qualified analyst, environmental analysts in the world, and bring them to the House of Assembly in Rawson Square, and let them conduct their own analysis and tell us why these people could change so much once they get there. We've been fighting for 20 years, and they were all with us in opposition. But once they get in power, now the colonial honors have been reintroduced. And there's, I don't know how it comes about, maybe a couple of people sit in a room over a couple of cold ones, and they decide who they will not. They're not nominating anybody for me. We have to select our own heroes, and that has to be a process.
Yes, what the point I'm trying to make, again, supporting Doctor's position, what we have in this country today, it's just frightening. I mean, literally frightening. The Department of Labor has gotten to the point now where the employer is of the view that when they are summoned to come to the labor board, they refuse to come. And the law provides for the ministry to prosecute. They will not make a move. So what happens to the average worker? I think there should be a course in the high schools supporting the doctor's position that people need to know they need to know their basic rights. Bahamians just do not understand and appreciate their basic fundamental rights.
But after that course, Brother Fergie, they need to be given a dose of courage or whatever it is.
I share your view.
Education is one thing. Many of them know, you know, but they need to be given a dose of courage.
There's also the lived experience of scaremongering, which still goes on in this country. I happened to read, I was doing some research a few years ago on the '62 election, And we all know what happened in '62, but in the Tribune and in the Guardian and the Herald that I was reading in '62, there was threats of life being taken. There were quotes of UBP supporters who were saying to their wives, if you vote, and if you vote PLP, don't come home tonight.
I was a part of that. I had an aunt who worked for a white family. And they were threatened. And they were told, if you vote PLP, and they focused on the women.
Yes,
you know,
they did.
that was the first election that the women were able to vote.
Yes.
You vote for the PLP, don't come back to work tomorrow. And we're going to fire your husband. And all of that intimidation.
But the point I'm making is you're seeing that kind of intimidation by employers. And otherwise, today, people, even the fact that they don't know their right is one thing. But even when they know their right, they're still afraid to articulate, to go before the labor board, to talk and to stand up because they're afraid of being victimized. So that culture of victimization is still
But there has to be something that we're prepared to fight for.
Of course.
If not for yourself, for your children. And we saw years ago the path that this nation is on. You know, shortly after 1967, the then PLP government, who brought about majority rule, they began to show a lack of interest in observing it, in institutionalizing it, in holding it up for what it should be, one of the most important events in the history of the Bahamas, at least recent history. And it was just being pushed into the shadows of the history of this country. Nobody was observing it. By the late 1990s, majority rule was almost a thing unheard of, majority rule day. It was then that the courageous and militant people of Bay and Grandstown decided that this is a part of our legacy. We fought for this, and we are not going to allow it to die. And so we decided to observe it, and from 2004, we were basically the only entity acknowledging, observing, celebrating Majority Rule Day. Now, if the very government that brought it about fought for it, that brought them to power, if they were not prepared to really place it where it deserves to be in the history of this country, and no other government seemed to be interested. As a matter of fact, the first national observation of Majority Rule Day was organized by the Bay and Grandstown Advancement Association in 2013. When the PLP was in power, we badgered them. The FNM was in opposition, we badgered them. The Governor General at that time was Sir Arthur Folks. He immediately came on board. And we brought them all together, as this nation will remember, for the first time, that all factions of our political and Bahamian business society were in one place to observe Majority Rule Day. Isn't that something? From 1967. From 1967 to 2013. And we tried to get the full picture. For example, people do not fully appreciate the role played by Sir Randall and Sir Alvin Brain, and they need to know this because they need to understand that Majority Rule Day was not brought about only by a political party. Many other groups and individuals played a role. Some of the English people who are still in the public system in this country were very active in that. So, Chris, I know we are looking during this month of bringing the labor movement and the contribution they made toward Majority Rule. Give us a little background about that.
Well, we want to acknowledge this particular Majority Rule Day, January 10th, 2018, the legacy of labor particularly, as we are also celebrating simultaneously the 60th anniversary of the general strike.
Oh, yes.
And so we have a few events that we want to talk about. We have the event on January 11th at the Bahamas Historical Society, the lecture. We also have on the 17th, we're planning an event to reenact the blocking of the Windsor Field Airport, which was, of course, in November of '57, but that was a catalyst really for the strike in '58. I would say it spilled over into '58. We also are having at the university on the 23rd of January an event where we're going to interview some of our living legends. You mentioned Stubbs. We're also going to involve people like Lady Fox. We're going to look at some other individuals, or maybe children of the persons who were alive. Because, you know, when you talk about the 60th anniversary, unfortunately, a lot of these persons have passed
not
away.
around. That's right.
And then the last event is on the 24th, the day after, where we're going to have an event, hopefully, at Workers' House, which is going to showcase really a labor component. We're going to have a lecture or a panel discussion with labor leaders to discuss the significance of the general strike.
Well, there are other events. Why don't we do this? Listening to you, there's so much to share with the Bahamian people, and we don't have time on this program. Why don't we invite you back next week, Tuesday, when you can have all of this information.
Sure.
And bring in maybe a couple of your other committee. I think Fred Munnings is on your committee.
Yes.
But we got to bring in Fred Munnings next week.
Yeah, he'd be a great person to come on the show. Yes.
Yeah, he's passionate. So next week, book that right now. Next week, we will come same time and expand because there's so much to talk about. And we are not going to make the same mistake we've been making, which is on the 10th, you have a little activity, a little flurry, somebody read a little speech, and that's it for a year. No, we're going to come and drill down into this.
We should.
And that is why on the 7th of July, there's a Thanksgiving service, small scale. We don't have the resources. We don't have the resources to do it at the national level. We're having a Thanksgiving service on Sunday at 11 a.m. at our church. We are not going to let this die. We will hold this, going into the grave. And then on the entire week next week, we will be visiting the various schools. And we've been doing this for years, making presentations. And I am so pleased that just before leaving the office to come for this program, a school called. And they wondered if we could come and share with them. So the demand is there. And so we are recruiting persons who have the historical knowledge to go into these schools to share with them. And that's all of next week. And then on the 11th, we're having the lecture, the public lecture at Bahamas Historical Society. You will be one of the presenters. Our presenter in chief is going to be Sir Arthur Folkes. See, he lived it.
Absolutely.
He lived it. He is a legend of this progressive movement. And so he's going to be our main presenter. We're going to have the labor movement there because this is all intertwined. And it is all there for us to share with our people. We've come to the end of the program, but Obie, we got to get some closing remarks from you.
I just want to thank you, Rev, for inviting me here along with my colleague to give just a bird's eye view as to where we're going to go with this. I am on board. I'm committed to it. I strongly believe in it. And I was very impressed with Doc with his presentation at the university last year. And I happen to have a copy of his paper. And I'm asking Fred, who's our director, to make sure every member of the union get access to that because it's very important. You need to know who you are.
That's right.
In order for you to sell yourself to anybody. And Rev, seeing that this is the second day in the year, I want to wish you and your lovely wife and lovely family health and prosperity for 2018, and also Doc and his family and the entire workers of the country. And I can't leave Fred out because I will not be able to get from here back to my office.
Oh, Fred
so
is.
To Fred, who is my ultimate friend.
Brief remarks in closing, Doc.
Well, just to encapsulate, I want to wish everyone a happy New Year. Laborers in the Bahamas, as you work, continue to celebrate and commemorate our accomplishments to this point, but we have a lot of work to still be done.
I agree.
Let's use this January to reflect and ponder on where we've come, but where we're also needing to go.
Well, we must, in our next segment, look at that area that we mentioned that we didn't have time to get into. That's the March post-1967. The revolution appears to have stalled, and we must get it rejuvenated. We must get it moving again. And it has to be in the hearts of our people. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for sharing a part of your evening with us and our two distinguished guests. But just a brief housekeeping matter before I leave. The Bain Grandstand Advancement Association is having a wreath-laying ceremony at the gravesite of Alexander Bain, the co-founder of Bain Town, on Monday, the 8th of January at 4 p.m. His relatives, and there are still quite a number of his relatives around. He died in 1891. We're inviting his relatives and interested persons to come. The gravesite is located in what is viewed as a park on the corner of Meeting Street and Augusta Street. It's in fact a cemetery by the name of Bethlehem Cemetery, established in the early 1700s. And some decades ago, some very wise person decided they will insert playground equipment and desecrate that sanctified ground and call it a park. That's where the grave site of Alexander Bain is, and that's where we'll be 4 o'clock on Monday. That's next Monday, to lay a wreath in recognition of the contribution that he has made. Because many people don't know, Baintown is a private development. He bought that. Alexander Bain and his half-brother Charles Henry Bain, they purchased outright the land and sold it at relatively low cost to people of color to develop themselves. So unless we know our history, what did Marcus say?
Man without knowledge of his past is like a tree without roots.
There you go. So folks, we'll be back next week. Please be with us again. And thank you very much for watching this evening. Good night.
Good night.
Only love can save us now. Only love.